Greetings and welcome to another Patch Notes video here at Words About Games, a weekly video series that lets us host discussions and post opinion pieces about our various thoughts on games, gaming, and the industry. Today I want to talk about some games that I think got overlooked or overshadowed in 2019. With no major releases coming in the first couple of months of 2020, and everything else seemingly poised to get delayed, you might find yourself with a bit of free gaming time on your hands. Don't get me wrong, there are some really cool, interesting looking games coming out, but it doesn't feel like it did this time last year, where there was a new huge game coming out every week to tie up your time. So I thought now would be the perfect time to present you with a list of 7 games that came out in 2019 that might have passed you by, but you should really have a look at if you get the chance. If any of these games pique your interest and you want to know more, there are links to all of my reviews of these games in the description below the video. January 2019 was unusually stacked. What with the launch of Resident Evil 2, the most critically acclaimed game of the year according to OpenCritic, Kingdom Hearts 3, one of the best-selling games of the year, and some wonderful indie games like Wargroove and My Time at Porsche. And although it didn't break into my Game of the Year list, PIKUNIKU was a game that I feel like got unfairly buried underneath all of those other releases. PIKUNIKU is a puzzle platformer where you have to explain to a budding gardener that plants need water, not just love, to grow. Or where you have to kick explosive pine cones at giant robots. Or where you engage in QTE battles to find out who's king of the dance floor. It's also a game where you uncover a massive government conspiracy involving robots and corn. This game is a delight in almost every way. It's a gorgeous game with bright, colourful art style that looks like it was drawn with crayons. It's also a game packed with eccentrically endearing oddballs, a wonderfully absurd sense of humour, and a wickedly perceptive parody of late-stage capitalism. And if that doesn't sound like a recipe for success, well, I don't know what else to tell you. Someone once described EASTSHADE to me as like Skyrim, but with painting instead of fighting dragons, and anthropomorphic animals who aren't just Khajiit who has wares. This is an honest-to-goodness quote from a real person. I love my friends. I include the quote here because it's kind of true. Stepping out into the fantasy world of EASTSHADE really does have an Elder Scrolls-esque vibe to it. Minus all the bugs, of course. It's a super chill game that's overflowing with positivity, which makes it a genuinely heartwarming game to experience. Rather than fighting monsters or surviving in a harsh world, you're a painter. The worst thing that happens to you happens before you even start playing. You're shipwrecked at the island of Lindau. You've come to the island to paint its most beautiful locations, fulfilling the last wishes of your dying mother, who badly wanted you to see just how wonderful the island is. Along the way, you try to help out the people you meet as best you can, whether you're painting an owl for a lady who just very much wants an owl painting above her fireplace, or you're trying to get a bucket off an innkeeper's head. While the painting mechanic is nothing more involved than taking a screenshot and seeing it appear on the canvas, I can still heartily recommend EASTSHADE as a thoroughly pleasant and heartwarming game. This entry is aimed at a very small subset of people, namely those that purchased the game in a small window when it was actually available on Steam, but haven't played it yet. It was removed from sale about a week after it launched due to what Wikipedia refers to as the art material incident. I was lucky enough to be sent a code for the game and stream it before the incident, and it's a damn shame you can't buy this game anymore, because it was one of the best horror games of 2019. Like Red Candle Games' previous release, Detention, this is a showcase for a developer who understands how to build dread. Like its predecessor, Devotion knows how to get under your skin and unsettle you as you play. Part of this is down to the game's use of Taiwanese folklore and building its world. Part of it is down to just how good Red Candle is at very slowly ratcheting up tension and fear, hoisting the player's anxiety levels up and keeping them in a heightened state of terror. If you weren't fortunate enough to secure a copy of Devotion, which is an unfortunate reality for most people out there, I'd recommend going back further and checking out Detention, and then waiting eagerly to see what Red Candle Games comes up with next. This recommendation comes with a pretty glaring caveat, which I'll get into in a few moments. The Occupation is an immersive sim political thriller, which is something we don't often see tackled in video games, and we definitely need more of. You play a journalist in 1980s Manchester trying to uncover the truth behind a terrorist attack and a government bill which will restrict civil liberties. You arrive at a government building ostensibly to conduct a series of interviews, but leading up to those interviews, you can attempt to find clues and information in the building itself, arming yourself with plenty of ammunition for your interviews in an attempt to cut through the political doublespeak to get to the truth. This all takes place in real time. In the game's first level, you have an hour before your appointment, and you can choose to spend this time exploring. You find leads, which lead to more clues, which leads to information that you can use. There are a variety of different leads, each with multiple steps to take to gather the information you're after, and figuring out what to do in each step is just challenging enough to be really satisfying when you successfully complete it. The caveat? The AI of the Wandering God that's around to stop you easily accessing restricted areas is incredibly easy to manipulate. The Occupation is still a great game regardless, but to get the most out of it, you'll need to do a little bit of roleplay and not cheese the AI. Dungeon crawlers like Operencia don't come around all that often, and when a good entry in the genre does get released, we need to treasure them at all costs. The last dungeon crawler I played that I would categorize as great was The Legend of Grimrock 2 on PC, and that was back in 2014. So I fully recognise that part of the reason why I hold Operencia in such a high regard that it almost made my Game of the Year list is because I'm simply starved of compelling dungeon crawlers. However, this is a really enjoyable game. You explore a beautiful grid-based fantasy world in first person, asking talking trees for help and fighting angry skeletons, all while your endlessly entertaining companions continue to point out the absurdity of the situations you continue to find yourself in while trying to save the world. And they are, admittedly, quite absurd. Operencia brings a few of its own ideas to the venerable, if all too rare, genre. Chief amongst them is the way combat works. It's turn-based, which is fairly standard for the genre. But the meat of Operencia's combat mechanics are its lanes. Enemies position themselves on one of three lanes, close, mid, or long. Different attacks and abilities are effective at different ranges. Melee attacks, for example, do full damage at close range, but minimal damage at long range. It gives combat a really unique flavour and helps Operencia stand out as one of the more enjoyable games I played last year. Void Bastards is a pulp science fiction game come to life as a roguelike first-person shooter available as part of Game Pass, and if that sentence doesn't sell you on at least giving the game a look, I should also mention that you're guided through the game by a fairly homicidal AI voiced by Stanley Parable narrator Kevin Brighting, and the mutants that you're fighting hurl insults like twatbag and ballsack at you through thick Liverpudlian accents, all while complaining about someone called Barbara. Void Bastards 100% drew me in thanks to its incredible art style and presentation while I was looking around for a game to review during the pre-E3 slowdown. And while the game's comic book aesthetics and attitudes are one of the major draws for the game, this is also a really solid roguelike FPS. When your success or failure is more likely to be determined by random chance than skill, or lack thereof, fighting my way through the galaxy at the behest of the worst HR rep of all time was a really compelling gameplay loop. It features a loop that'll be really familiar to anyone who has played this type of game before. You start off dying all the time before you craft a decent weapon or unlock a couple of decent abilities. Then you start dying a bit less frequently, allowing you to plunder further and get a little better, and so on until you're in a place where you can feel somewhat confident in your abilities. And when you die, just blame Barbara. She doesn't seem to be popular, even among the mutants. Dicey Dungeons is a really addictive deck-building dungeon crawler. Side note, 2019 was a really good year for deck-building games. You literally play it as a dice block running through a demented game show being run by Lady Luck, who definitely hasn't stacked the odds against you. You explore dungeons for cards, upgrades, and cash, and you fight monsters by rolling dice, who aren't, you, which powers your attacks. But developer Terry Kavanagh throws a pretty genius twist into the mix. At the beginning of each run, you select a character class. Instead of just giving you a couple of different abilities, each class fundamentally changes how the game is played. The warrior is the standard class. You generally just need to get the highest number on the dice to do more damage with your weapons, which you can only use once each per turn. But then there's the thief, whose weapons are reusable, but only work with lower dice rolls. A 6 is useless if your main weapon only accepts dice rolls of 3 or lower. Other characters have completely different interactions with the dice altogether. The robot doesn't roll dice, instead gaining them from a risk-reward game of blackjack. The witch assigns spells to different numbered slots and uses dice rolls to activate them. Honestly, Dicey Dungeons is a phenomenal twist on the genre, and now that I'm thinking about it again, I'm starting to wonder how it didn't end up on my Game of the Year list. Thanks very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, consider sticking around here at Words About Games. Our content includes review impressions of games big and small, a weekly podcast dedicated to discussing the happenings in and around the games industry, weekly opinion videos, reactions, debate-driven top 5 and top 10 lists, a regular Hall of Fame series where we discuss our favourite games, and indie game spotlights. We also stream every Friday and Saturday at twitch.tv/wordsaboutgames. Most importantly, have a brilliant day.